Joining me now is former World Bank President David Malpass. David, it's always great to speak with you. What did you make of the president's comments at the UN yesterday?
Hi, Cheryl. Well, he was very forceful and on a number of topics, not just the oil, but there was climate, there was Argentina, there was Ukraine. I think one of the overarching themes is the U.S. is going to be producing a lot more energy. And I think the world has to produce a lot more energy so that it's less dependent on Russia. We've got the problem right now that India really wants to buy oil from Russia. Japan is buying a lot of gas from Russia. So one of the things I think that the NATO countries have to do is themselves produce more energy like the U.S. is doing. That means traditional nuclear power. Japan needs to restart its nuclear power plants after Fukushima. We need gas, and we need gas pipelines, and we need small modular reactors. You know, the innovation in nuclear power is going to be super important to meeting the world's energy needs. So the president was forceful. I hope Europe got the message, but I'm sometimes skeptical of that.
Well, you would know from experience, David. At the same time, we are so dependent for rare earth minerals, critical minerals, on, well, China. And that's been for decades. That's something else that the Trump administration wants to change. Your thoughts?
It's the minerals themselves are really important for the supply chain, and then the processing of the minerals turns out to be the critical path. And so the U.S. needs to do a lot more in that. I think it's going to take time. So I was really intrigued by your previous segment on lithium and the ETFs, and that's helping channel capital into these new industries and new sources of material. But I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done on that. I've been pleased to see the U.S. and China in these conversations, and the U.S. pushing hard on the trade talks with China. So I think there's work to be done there. And then we need to triple our efforts in the U.S. On producing and refining the critical minerals so that we have our own supply chain.
And that we have a strong defense industry. That's something that our Pentagon correspondent Jennifer Griffin and I were speaking about. You mentioned Argentina. You know, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was on Fox Business this morning, and he did say that the U.S. is ready to support Argentina if needed. We know that that was something else that was brought up yesterday at the UN. I want to focus on the. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say Argentina has super valuable resources, and if it would get out of its own way, it could fund its own development and recovery. So I hope they can do that. One step would be if they stop using the peso. You know, the Argentine peso has collapsed so many times it's hard to even count, and so they have this opportunity right now to move to stable money. Stable coins in the U.S. is this giant opportunity for poor people to actually control their own destiny. And so I hope Argentina grabs it.
Yeah. You also, your name has been floated. I know you've spoken about this before. Your name's been floated to be the next Federal Reserve chairman. But one of the things that you said in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and I want to ask you about this because I don't think this gets enough coverage. You said that the Fed's models, they need sweeping reforms, is one of the things that you said in one of your opinion pieces with the Journal. There's two on our screen. But you said the Fed needs to jettison its anti-growth models that target backward-looking inflation data, impose speed limits on growth, and assert that too low an unemployment rate causes inflation. I mean, you're talking about a foundational structural change at the Fed, and that's needed.
Thank you. It is. And I was very pleased to see Secretary Bessent being very strong on the change in direction. And President Trump is leading this effort by really calling out the Fed on the building, no accountability for the waste there. But that goes through their economic models as well. They haven't worked over time. And the Fed needs to do, I think, a huge amount of rethinking. So the simple point is there needs to be more within the Fed Fed models that recognize supply, meaning production of things like critical minerals, of things like energy, as being an enabler of an economy, and then also defending the dollar. If you do those two things, people will invest in the U.S. and in the U.S. dollar, and you can have lower interest rates across the curve. That has to be brought into the models, and it's not there right now.
You know, we saw with the new Fed governor, Stephen Moran, he pushed for more of an aggressive rate cut at that meeting. Didn't get it, but he did have at least had his voice on the record, if you will. Do you think that changes? Do you think that his voice can be a voice that's listened to at the Fed, in particular the way that the board is structured right now?
I think it can be, and he speaks clearly and forcefully, but it's an uphill battle. The world's central banks work together, and they, in general, are against fast growth. They have these models that say that there's a speed limit for the economies, and if you go over that, they're supposed to raise interest rates. It doesn't make any sense. It hasn't worked in the past, and so one of the key parts of their model is to recognize that higher interest rates are not a way that brings down inflation. It's going to be production that brings down inflation. So they need to hammer on that, but it's an uphill battle to get the Fed system to allow that kind of change. President Trump's been forceful on that, and I hope as forceful as at the United Nations yesterday.
He certainly was, and you know, too late has become the phrase, and that has not gone away. I think it's stuck for Jerome Powell. David Malpass, it's great to speak with you as always. Thanks for joining me today. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Cheryl.